And now I'll hand the floor over to Mike Davis.
Great, and thank you for having me. I want to just step back. Brian did a great job of explaining what the Justice Department is doing in Georgia. I want to step back and just explain more broadly how the Justice Department is being very political in just about everything that they do. So when I was the chief counsel for nominations for the Senate Judiciary Committee, it was our job to vet these nominees and confirm them, right? And so the attorney general's the top official, obviously, at the Justice Department, the deputy attorney. So Judge Merrick Garland's the attorney general. When he got through, people thought, okay, he's going to be an adult. He might be liberal, but he's going to be independent. He promised independence when he became the attorney general, and that has not panned out at all. You have Lisa Monaco, who's the deputy attorney general, and generally the deputy is the chief operating officer of the Justice Department, and they oversee all of the divisions of the Justice Department, both the criminal side of the house, the FBI criminal division, national security division, other criminal components, along with the civil side of the house. Civil division, civil rights division, many of the litigating divisions on the civil side. So who is the number three is the associate attorney general, who is supposed to work for the deputy attorney general and help the deputy attorney general and the attorney general manage the civil side of the house. The associate attorney general is Vanita Gupta, and that is the problem with the Justice Department today. She is a radical activist. At Article 3 Project, we did not come out and oppose Merrick Garland's nomination. We did not come out and oppose Lisa Monaco's nomination. We came out and strongly opposed Vanita Gupta's nomination because I knew from my experience, and I know a lot of other people who worked on nominations know Vanita, that she is a radical left-wing activist, and she has brought that radical left-wing activism to the Justice Department. And what has happened is that the Attorney General has been largely sidelined during this process of over the last year. And Lisa Monaco, the number two, who should be babysitting Vanita Gupta, is not. She's focused on national security and the criminal side of the house. And so the Biden White House counsel's office, Ron Klain, and other top Biden officials are working with Vanita to push a radical agenda. And we see this every single day. We see this with the war on the police and war for criminals, as I call it. You saw these defund the police activists going over to the Justice Department. One of Vanita's top deputies is Kristen Clark. Kristen Clark is another left-wing activist who worked with Vanita on the outside to, oppose all of Trump's nominees, falsely accuse Justice Kavanaugh of serial gang rape. She runs the Civil Rights Division, which is one of the key litigating divisions to push their agenda. Kristen Clark's top deputy, the principal deputy assistant attorney general for civil rights, is Pam Karlan. Pam Karlan of Trump impeachment days, who made a fool of herself at the Trump impeachment. But these are hard-charging left-wing activists, and let's look at what they've done. They came into office and they immediately opened up civil rights investigations against both the Minneapolis and the Louisville, Kentucky police departments. They issued a moratorium on death penalties. Regardless of what you think about the death penalty, it's the law. And you either, if there's a constitutional reason not to enforce the law, that's one thing, but that's clearly not what is going on here. They just don't like the death penalty, so they just stopped enforcing the death penalty. They've been harassing gun dealers. So there's a war on, not only is there the war on police, there's a war on gun owners. There's a war on parents. You saw this out in Loudoun County, Virginia, when these parents are rightly upset. Ian Pryor works closely with us at Unsilenced Majority, and frankly, all my groups. He's leading the charge out there for fight for schools. And they've exposed how the school board out there covered up two rapes in the schools. And so the parents were rightly upset, and they showed up at these protests at these school board meetings to protest this. And then the Biden Justice Department sicks the FBI on them. I mean, it's just unbelievable. There's, frankly, I think, a war on Trump supporters. You see this with the different treatment between the mostly peaceful but fiery protests since June of 2020 with BLM and Antifa attacking For example, the Portland federal courthouse on a near nightly basis. They burned St. John's Church. They burned the Secret Service guard station at the White House. They assaulted Senator Rand Paul as he's leaving the White House. Nothing seems to happen when it comes to the protesters who the left likes. But if you look at the January 6th protesters, and I've said all along that many of them were misguided goofballs. They had every right to be at the Capitol on January 6th. They certainly didn't have a right to trespass into the Capitol, and they certainly didn't have a right to be violent. But if you're going to send the full force of the FBI after one set of protesters, the January 6th protesters, and keep them in pretrial confinement for almost a year, and throw the book at them, and then do almost nothing, give Antifa amnesty to the other side, that's a problem. We've seen this with the war on conservative media. It used to be that if you even, we've seen this recently. If you have subpoenas of mainstream, so-called mainstream, which means liberal reporters at the New York Times or other news outlets like that, the left, the media, Democrats, they go berserk. But we've had with the Biden Justice Department, you see where they're going after Project Veritas. Project Veritas, because they happen to, they're real journalists. They happen to be conservative journalists, but they got a hold of President Biden's daughter's diary. So the FBI raided them. You saw this with John Sullivan. There was a subpoena for John Sullivan's records, another conservative journalist. What's been most interesting is the war on Texas, as I call it. You see this not only, Brian talked about what's going on in Georgia, and he's doing a great job there. There's also a war on Texas when it comes to their voter reforms. They pass laws making it easier to vote and harder to cheat, and the Biden Justice Department sues them. You saw this with the abortion lawsuit on SB 8. I don't see how there's a federal interest with SB 8, but that didn't stop the Biden Justice Department from filing a lawsuit on SB 8. Immigration enforcement. The Biden administration has decided that they have not imported enough Democrat voters. President Trump did a good job of enforcing our immigration laws, so they stopped building the fence and they stopped enforcing our immigration laws. And so you see Texas stepping up to enforce to do things about it, because they have to feel the brunt of the crime and the property damage in Texas when the federal government doesn't enforce our immigration laws. The Biden Justice Department goes after Texas for that. You're even seeing this with Vanita Gupta was pushing this. The ACLU was working with Vanita's office and the Civil Rights Division to so-called settle these separation claims. The parents who claimed that their children were separated from them. These are frivolous claims that were brought against the Justice Department. These parents are gravely endangering their kids by bringing them across the border. There's a very good chance these kids could be, they could die, they could be exploited, they could be murdered. My personal view is that these parents should be prosecuted for putting these kids in such grave danger. But instead, the Biden Justice Department was talking about giving each one of these separated kids $450,000. So they were gonna essentially turn many of these illegal immigrant families into millionaires out of this process. They finally backed down just the other day, yesterday, I believe, to the political pressure from the House and Senate. But it just shows you what they're willing to try to do if they're left unchecked. In Texas with redistricting, they're going after Texas on the redistricting, saying that it's going to disenfranchise Hispanics and Blacks or dilute their voting power, which is just nonsense. But they're going to go after Georgia. They're almost certainly going to go after North Carolina. They're going to go after Ohio. Anywhere where Republicans control the redistricting process, the Biden partisan activists at the Justice Department will go after them. But it's amazing that if you look at places like Illinois, Maryland, and New York, where the Democrats control the process, I mean, they're drawing some pretty interesting gerrymandered districts, but the Biden Justice Department doesn't raise a peep about that. I call this the war on Asian Americans. You look at what they did. Asian Americans have a legitimate civil rights claim against Yale for the way that Asian Americans were discriminated against in the admission process. So the Trump Justice Department brings that lawsuit. The Biden Justice Department drops it. And they really don't have a good reason for dropping it. They also, remember, the Justice Department sent 15 special agents to investigate Bubba Wallace's fake news, the garage poll. So they're ready, willing, and able to deploy federal assets around the country when there's a civil rights violation, except apparently if it doesn't fit into their racial narratives. Because we just had arrest out in San Francisco of 6 guys who are specifically targeting Asians and elderly Asians to rob them because they thought that Asians don't bank like the rest of us, and so they carry a lot of cash. And so that just came out. We'll see if the Biden Justice Department deploys federal assets. We'll see if Chris Wray, President Trump's greatest mistake, the FBI director, deploys FBI agents to go look into those obvious Black on Asian hate crimes in San Francisco. We also see, again, the war on Trump supporters and the war on Republicans. With the January 6th protest, again, you can't treat one side more harshly than the other side. All violence should be prosecuted, right? It doesn't matter if you're a January 6th protester or a BLM protester, all violence is violence, and you have to treat them the same. You can't give amnesty for a year to the BLM and Antifa protesters, but then send the full force of the federal government after every grandmother who trespassed into the Capitol on January 6th. Here's the thing that's been the most troubling to me as someone who's been involved in these fights is I worked in the Bush 43 White House. I was in the White House Office of Political Affairs. And part of my job was to do the hiring and firing across the entire Bush administration, all the political appointees, including the Justice Department. And we took a lot of heat back in 2005, 2006, even beyond that, when I was back in the Bush 43 White House, asserting executive privilege on behalf of the president and former presidents. And Dick Cheney was the one who pushed us to do this. And he pushed it very strongly. And he had a very principled reason for doing this. And that is to protect the institution of the presidency. You see with the January 6th commission, the Biden administration has just completely waived executive privilege, which frankly, it's going to come back to bite the Biden people. You're going to see Ron Klain, you're going to see Susan Rice, other senior Biden officials very much regret the fact that they waived executive privilege broadly for January 6th. And so, you're seeing where Mark Meadows is trying to assert executive privilege as the White House chief of staff. If there's a person who can assert executive privilege, it's the White House chief of staff. And the January 6th commission has gone after Bannon. And before Bannon could even litigate his claims in court, who knows if he has legitimate executive privilege claims, but he's litigating these in court. The Biden Justice Department takes the highly unusual move of indicting him before he can even litigate his claims. They're also, the January 6th commission with Liz Cheney, it's pretty ironic that her dad was the one who pushed executive privilege so strongly, and she's willing to throw it out the door because of her Trump arrangements. With Mark Meadows, the January 6th commission is threatening to hold him in contempt of court as well. And that will be a very, very big test for the Biden Justice Department, whether they pursue contempt against a former White House chief of staff when the former president is asserting executive privilege, but the current president is waiving it. So that should be interesting. It shouldn't even get to that point. The Justice Department needs to take principled positions on executive privilege because it can hurt presidents from both sides of the aisle, and it can hurt the presidency. So that's what I have on the long list of the Biden Justice Department. Frankly, it surprised me. I really did not think that Judge Garland would let the Justice Department degenerate into what it has become. It's shocking to me. Before I thought, okay, maybe Merrick Garland is this much of a partisan. I don't know if that's the case. I actually think he's just weak and irrelevant, and he's lost control of his department to Vanita Gupta. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. That was really fantastic. And if you guys have a moment, I'd like to offer a couple questions, and I'll start with Brian, especially sharing your experience in Georgia. What are some things that states can do to combat a politicized DOJ? Our Republican attorney generals, kind of our last line of defense. And then layered on top of that, what are some things that attorneys can do to kind of join this effort and fight back against oppression by the DOJ?
I think the biggest thing we can do, number one, I think Republican attorneys general are our key line of defense. And we're very proud of our Attorney General, Chris Carr, here in Georgia, him and leading the fight against the DOJ. But I feel like shining a light on this is the best thing we can do. Is every time the DOJ is taking these steps, as Mike's outlined what they're doing with Georgia and Texas, just continuing to hammer away to help people understand this is not normal and this is not appropriate to advance the political agenda of the left through the Department of Justice. I'm like Mike. I was surprised that Merrick Garland is going down this road too, just because of his reputation. But here we are. I think the biggest thing you as Republican lawyers, though, we all can do is just finding opportunities to help spread the word in your area. I mean, I think we can help change the conversation around different places, whether that's through amicus brief, whether that's through other means. But let's try to get the word to the bar writ large of what is going on here and shine the light on it. That's the best thing I can think that we can do at this point.
Great. And Mike, did you have anything on that?
President Trump, I love President Trump. I know a lot of people don't, even Republicans don't, but I'll tell you the biggest accomplishment, the most consequential thing he did as president was transform the federal judiciary. And that includes transforming the 5-4 John Roberts court to the 5-4 Clarence Thomas court and flipping a majority of the circuits around the country, the federal circuit courts, to majority Republican appointed. What Republicans need to do is not be the string orchestra on the sinking Titanic. It's actually to fight back. And that includes filing lawsuits. These state attorneys general have been doing a great job of filing lawsuits and punching back against the Biden overreach. They need to do more on COVID. These COVID mandates where the Biden administration, frankly, they're getting their butts kicked in federal court. And that's a great thing. We just need to stop cowering in fear to the left and fight back. Take off the, I said this to the New York Times when I started the Article 3 project. It's take off the gloves, put on the brass knuckles, and break their glass jaws. We need to start fighting back. Our country is on the line here, right? And this is no time for country club Republicans to cry about this in the clubhouse. We need to start fighting.
Great. Well, thank you, gentlemen. With that call to action, I think that will conclude today's webinar. I hope everyone has a wonderful Christmas and holiday season. Thank you again, Brian and Mike. And we will be in touch in the new year. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you.